Imagine this, an endless desert, no borders, no landmarks, no sound but the wind. Ahead of you, the horizon trembles in the heat. Behind you, the tracks are already fading. Through this silence moves a caravan. Dozens of people, hundreds of camels, loaded with silk, salt, gold, spices, and something far more fragile, hope. They know the journey is dangerous. They accept the risk. What they do not know is that some journeys were never meant to end, because throughout history, entire caravans vanished in the desert without a battle, without witnesses, without graves. They were not defeated. They were erased. History loves noise. It remembers empires rising, armies marching, cities burning. But history struggles with silence, and the desert is the quietest place on earth. When a caravan disappears at sea, sometimes the waves return the wreckage. When a city falls, ruins remain. But when a caravan vanishes in the desert, there is nothing. No bodies, no ruins, no final message, just sand. Caravans were the lifelines of the ancient world. They connected civilizations that would never meet. They carried language, religion, technology, and ideas across thousands of kilometers of nothingness. For months at a time, the desert was their entire universe. One miscalculation, one wrong star, one missed oasis, and that universe collapsed. Families knew this when caravans departed. Goodbyes were not casual, they were heavy. A father kissed his children, knowing he might never return. A trader memorized his wife's face, just in case memory was all he had left. Weeks passed, then months. No caravan. At first, people said, they are delayed. They chose another route. The weather must be bad. But eventually silence answered. No messenger arrived. No goods reached the market. No survivors came back. The caravan was gone. Not defeated. Gone. What makes these disappearances terrifying is that sometimes nothing went wrong. The guide was experienced. The water was carefully measured. The route was well known. And yet, the desert does not need mistakes. A sudden sandstorm can erase direction in minutes. Heat can turn strength into weakness without warning. Night cold can kill as easily as the sun. In the desert, survival is never guaranteed, only borrowed. Along the great trade arteries of the ancient world, especially the Silk Road, disappearances were disturbingly common. This was not just a trade route, it was the artery of civilization. But for every caravan that arrived, another never did. Some were swallowed by storms so vast they darkened the sky. Others were quietly sabotaged, their water destroyed, their guides killed. And some simply followed maps that lied, oases that once existed, but no longer did. Hope led them forward. Reality ended them. Ancient records rarely explain what happened. Instead, they offer a single cold sentence. The caravan failed to arrive. No details, no mourning, no names, because there were no witnesses left to write more. When everyone dies, the story dies with them. And that is the true horror of the desert. It doesn't kill loudly. It doesn't announce its victories. It simply removes people from the world and smooths the sand over their existence. Footprints vanish, bones disappear, metal corrodes. Time finishes the rest. This is not a story about lost gold or missing treasure. This is a story about lost humans. Men and women whose lives ended without record, without memory, without even a marker to say someone was here. Caravans that disappeared without a trace remind us of something deeply unsettling. History is not only what was written, some of the greatest tragedies were never recorded at all, and the desert is still keeping those secrets. The desert does not scream. It does not charge like an army or strike like a weapon. It waits. Throughout history, more people have died in deserts than on many battlefields. Yet their deaths were never celebrated, never recorded as heroic, never remembered. Because in the desert, death is quiet, and when someone dies quietly, they often disappear completely. The most terrifying thing about the desert is that it doesn't look like an enemy. There are no walls to breach, no soldiers to fight, no warning signs, just open land, endless space, and a sun that never negotiates. By day, heat drains strength without mercy. By night, cold freezes bodies already weakened, and between them, wind erases direction itself. The desert doesn't need violence. Time does the work for it. For caravans, time was the real danger. 1 hour late could mean missing an oasis. One wrong turn could add days to a journey that only had hours of water left. At first, thirst did not cause panic. It caused silence. Mouths dried, thoughts slowed, decisions became careless. And in the desert, a careless decision is often the final one. What makes the desert truly deadly is that experience does not guarantee survival. Veteran guides who had crossed the sands for decades still vanished. They knew the stars. They knew the winds. They trusted their maps. But the desert changes faster than memory. An oasis can disappear. A familiar route can shift. A calm sky can become a wall of sand. In the desert, certainty is an illusion. And when the desert kills, it leaves no evidence. There are no ruins, no mass graves, no final letters. Sand buries bones. Wind scatters metal. Time removes everything else. Within years, it is impossible to tell whether anyone was ever there at all. Entire caravans, dozens of lives, months of preparation, entire futures, vanished as if erased from the world. This is why historians fear the desert. History depends on records, on witnesses, on remains. The desert provides none of these. At best, it leaves a single sentence behind. The caravan did not arrive. No names, no explanation, no closure, just absence. The desert does not judge. It does not care who you are, what you carry, or what you believe. Rich or poor, merchant or pilgrim, experienced or foolish. Everyone is equal beneath the sun. That is why the desert is history's quietest killer. It does not announce its victories. It simply removes people and smooths the sand over their memory. And it is still doing so today. Not every danger in the desert came from nature. Sometimes the deadliest threat was human, but desert attacks were nothing like city raids or open battles. There were no war cries, no clashing swords, no burning camps. In the desert, bandits preferred something far more effective: silence. Desert bandits were not reckless criminals. They were patient. They understood the land better than their victims. They read the wind. They knew how long water lasted. They knew what the desert would do if they simply stepped aside. Their goal was not to fight the caravan. Their goal was to let the desert finish the job. One of the most common tactics was eliminating the guide. One blade in the dark, one arrow, quiet, precise. The caravan was still alive, but now it was blind. No one left who could read the stars. No one who truly knew the route. And in the desert, a caravan without a guide is already dead. Another method was even crueler. Bandits would pierce the water skins or drain them silently during the night. The caravan often didn't notice for days. They believed water remained, hope remained, until the moment came when a skin was opened and nothing flowed out. No immediate panic. First disbelief, then fear. And in the desert, fear accelerates death. The most terrifying part of these attacks was how clean they were. No battle scars, no blood-soaked ground, no burned remains. Days later, a traveler might pass the same place and see nothing unusual. But a caravan had been condemned there, not attacked, not defeated, abandoned to die. Sometimes bandits took nothing at all. No gold, no silk, no camels, because transporting loot through the desert was risky. Instead, they waited. Days later, they returned. The desert had already done its work. Collecting from the dead was safer than fighting the living. In the desert, robbery was a slow art. Caravan guards understood this threat well. That is why camps were silent at night, fires were kept low, voices were rare, because sound travels far in open land. And every sound is an invitation. Historical records are vague about these attacks. They rarely describe battles. Instead, they leave behind a single line. The caravan was attacked. How? When? By whom? No one knew, because these attacks left no witnesses. They arrived like night and disappeared like dawn. Desert bandits trusted patience more than weapons. They understood a brutal truth. In the desert, you don't need to kill. You only need to wait. That is why many caravans were never recorded as destroyed. They were never listed as defeated. They simply never arrived, and history moved on without ever knowing why. In the desert, water is not just survival. Water is truth. And when that truth turns out to be false, entire caravans vanish. Ancient travelers trusted maps with their lives. A single dot on parchment, a palm tree, a blue circle, a name written in fading ink, could mean the difference between life and death. But deserts change, and maps often lie. For centuries, caravans crossed vast deserts, guided by maps copied again and again by hand. Each copy introduced small errors: a misplaced symbol, a name written where memory once existed, an oasis marked because someone once claimed it was there. Over time, rumors became geography, and geography became fatal. Many oases had once existed: a seasonal spring, a temporary water table, a place where rain pooled for only a few years. But deserts do not preserve, they erase. The water dried, the palms died, the ground hardened, yet the oasis remained on maps long after it vanished from reality. Caravans approaching these places felt relief long before arrival. They rationed less carefully, they pushed harder, they believed salvation was close. Hope altered decisions, and in the desert, hope can be dangerous. From a distance, mirages completed the illusion. Heat bent the air, light reflected from sand. What looked like water was nothing. But exhausted minds accepted the lie. Men began to see lakes where none existed. Camels staggered toward reflections that vanished with every step. By the time the truth was undeniable, it was already too late. Some caravans reached the marked location and found only silence. No water, no trees, no ruins. Just salt-cracked ground and the remains of others who had arrived before them. Bones with no names, broken jars, scraps of fabric, evidence of a shared mistake. Historical records sometimes mention these places indirectly. The caravan reached the oasis but found no water. The wells were dry. The place was abandoned, but often there is no record at all because no one survived to report the error. The most dangerous oases were the ones that almost existed: a damp patch of ground, a shallow depression where water had once gathered. Caravans dug desperately. They found mud, then dust. Hours turned into days, and every hour spent digging was an hour closer to death. False oases killed without violence. There was no ambush, no storm, no attack, just belief. Belief in a mark on a map drawn by someone who had never stood there. Some empires attempted to update their maps, but deserts moved faster than ink. Sandstorms buried landmarks. Dunes shifted routes. Springs vanished underground. By the time a map was corrected, dozens of caravans might already be gone. There is a cruel irony here. The oasis, symbol of life in the desert, became one of its deadliest traps because people trusted it. When archaeologists find remains deep in the desert today, they often discover something chilling. The caravan was not lost. It was exactly where it meant to be. The map was wrong. This is why experienced guides feared maps. They trusted stars more than paper, wind patterns more than drawings, memory more than ink. Because in the desert, a map can kill. Caravans that vanished chasing false oases were not careless. They were misled. And history rarely remembers deception as a cause of death. The desert did not need to attack them. It simply waited for belief to do the work. In the end, the desert does not need armies, storms, or weapons to claim its victims, because its greatest strength has always been patience. A patience so vast and indifferent that entire human lives can unfold, struggle, and end within it without leaving a single mark worth remembering. Caravans did not disappear because they were foolish, reckless, or weak, but because they trusted systems that could not keep up with a land that constantly reshaped itself, where roots shifted, water vanished underground, and familiar landmarks dissolved into identical horizons of sand and sky. Some were misled by maps that preserved memory instead of reality. Some were betrayed by false oases that existed only as ink on parchment. Some were quietly undone by bandits who understood that the desert itself was the most efficient weapon. and others simply made one small, human mistake in a place where mistakes were never forgiven. What makes these disappearances so unsettling is not the scale of the loss, but the silence that followed. Because when an entire caravan vanished, there was no final witness, no last testimony, no voice left to explain what truly happened. Only absence where certainty should have been. Families waited for men who never returned, cities expected goods that never arrived, and historians were left with empty records that reduced dozens of lives to a single sentence, stating that a caravan failed to reach its destination, as if those people had been delayed rather than erased. And yet, these lost caravans were once the veins of civilization, carrying not only silk and gold, but language, belief, technology, and connection across distances that no empire could control on its own. Meaning that every disappearance was not just a human tragedy, but a small rupture in the flow of history itself. The desert, however, does not acknowledge this loss because it does not distinguish between merchant and pilgrim, between experienced guide and first-time traveler, between those who came seeking profit and those who came seeking survival, treating all equally beneath the same relentless sun. Even today, when satellite images scan the sands and archaeology uncovers scattered bones and broken jars, the truth remains incomplete because the desert rarely explains itself, offering fragments instead of answers and reminders instead of closure. Perhaps that is why these stories endure, not as legends of conquest or glory, but as warnings carved into silence, reminding us that for all of humanity's ambition, knowledge, and confidence, there are still places on Earth where control is an illusion and survival is only temporary permission. The caravans that disappeared without a trace were not defeated by an enemy they could see, but by a landscape that did not care to be seen at all, and in that indifference lies the desert's greatest power. History remembers what was written, what was built, and what was won, but the desert reminds us of what was lost without record, without ceremony, and without a voice to tell the story. And somewhere beyond the last marked route, beneath shifting dunes that have erased every footprint, the desert keeps those stories buried, not out of cruelty, but because silence has always been its language. If this story made you pause, if the silence of the desert and the fate of those forgotten caravans stayed with you even for a moment, then history reached you. This channel isn't about heroes carved in stone. It's about the lives that disappeared without monuments, the stories that never made it into the chronicles. If you want to hear the parts of history that were never written, to understand the human cost behind maps, empires, and trade routes, subscribe to the channel. Like this video so these stories don't vanish again. Leave a comment so they are remembered. Share it so silence doesn't win. Because history is more than what survived on paper. Sometimes it lives only in those who choose to remember. Subscribe and let's uncover the stories history left behind.